Imagine spending years negotiating a trade deal, shaking hands, and promising stability, only to rip it all up overnight with one blanket decision. That's what's happening right now. And the shocking part? It's not just foreign governments feeling betrayed, it's American workers, from tourism to small businesses, who are paying the price.
Ambassador, as USTR's chief of staff in the first Trump administration, you oversaw the negotiation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, and the renegotiation of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, the KORUS. President Trump signed both of these agreements. He called the USMCA a colossal victory, and KORUS a historic milestone. And yet, with President Trump's new blanket tariffs, he is ripping up these agreements with our allies that we negotiated with. Why would any country want to do business with us, much less negotiate a trade deal, if we don't even honor our ongoing agreements?
So, Senator, we are the consumer of last resort. These countries have to sell here. They have, many of them, especially in Asia, have built their entire economies around exporting to us. They're very dependent on it, and that's part of why we have this huge trade deficit. With USMCA, those parties continue to enjoy duty-free treatment for many of the products that continue to comply with the rules that were set out 5 years ago. There's a big concern, Senator, that we did not have adequate other protections to stop the flow, particularly of like autos into the United States.
But there was a process for you to renegotiate that agreement this year. We talked about that in my office. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And it wasn't to do these blanket tariffs, correct?
What we have to address is an emergency, Senator.
That's true. And you should be honest. At least as you sit here, as you were in my office, be intellectually honest. Now, let me just ask this, because this is also true. And I so appreciate Senator Langford asking this. Time matters. How long did it take to negotiate that agreement, the USMCA, that you were part of?
We did it at breakneck speed. We did it in about 2 years.
2 years. And now you're telling us you have nearly 50 countries coming to you, approaching you to enter in a negotiation. And you think that you can do that overnight?
India.
Man, you're pretty superhuman here, if that's the case. So let's be realistic. That's all we're asking. Common sense and realism here, Ambassador, as you sit here before us. And let me talk about something else that is really important for my state, and I think this entire country, because this administration is forgetting that we have $1 billion economy when it comes to tourism into the United States. People know Las Vegas. My state is Nevada. We rely on tourism to our state, and now we're seeing an impact because of these tariffs, not just from Canada, but I am hearing from so many that are in the tourism and kind of leisure industry. We are seeing impacts because now this $1 billion industry of international tourism is having an impact on our economy. And this is a service industry. Let me just say this. I'm kind of offended by your testimony today that says we must accept self-inflicted economic pain, and I quote you by saying, to become an economy based on producing real goods and services. What does that mean? What does that mean to my service industry and every service industry across this country that relies on tourism and travel? That is the backbone, really, of part of our $1 billion economy. What do I tell them? That they just have to suck it up? That they're not really part of this real services? That you have another idea for the jobs that they should engage in? What do I tell them?
Oh, Senator, of course those are real services.
So what are you doing about the impact of international tourism and now these blanket tariffs having a negative impact? What are you doing to address that?
The whole sentence, Senator, said that we need to get away from government spending as funding our economy and financialization, and we need to move to real goods and services, including the tourism you're talking about.
So what are you doing to impact the negative impact of tourism right now?
Well, one thing I'll say is we can't have the status quo, right? I keep hearing that we should have, essentially what I'm hearing is we should have the status quo. We should keep the $1.2 trillion trade deficit that Biden left us with.
I'm asking you,
and I don't think that's adequate.
What are you doing in this administration to address now the impact that you're having with these blanket tariffs, not targeted tariffs, blanket tariffs, on international tourism that is a big impact to our economy? What are you doing to address that?
Well, Senator, as we're talking to all of these countries, we are talking about services. We are talking about making sure that we can export services to other countries. A lot of those that we export are, we have
well, let me say I only have so much time, and apparently you're not. So here's what I would like, because you haven't thought about this, and the administration hasn't really thought about it, because I haven't heard anybody talking about tourism. So why don't you come talk to me in my office, and let's talk about and put a plan together, because these blanket tariffs are having an impact on tourism in my state and across the country. So instead of just defending it, why don't you just come sit down with some of us and try to address the concerns that we are seeing and feeling in our states that this administration has not taken into account?
I'm happy to come speak with you. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Grassley.
Ambassador Greer, thank you for being here. I've made very clear throughout my public service that I'm a free and fair trader. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to regulate interstate and foreign commerce. I believe that Congress delegated too much authority to the President in Trade Expansion Acts of 1962 and trade.
What we just witnessed in that hearing wasn't just political theater. It was a senator shining a light on something most Americans rarely see: how fragile trust is in international trade and how easily it can be broken when governments act without foresight. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto wasn't simply asking questions to fill time. She was making a case about credibility. Think about it. The United States spent years hammering out agreements like the USMCA and the renegotiated deal with South Korea. These weren't casual handshakes. They were the result of painstaking negotiations, months of compromises, and entire industries adapting to the rules that were set in place. Agreements like these are supposed to last. They're supposed to give businesses and workers the certainty they need to plan, invest, and grow. But now, blanket tariffs from the Trump administration threaten to shred that certainty. Cortez Masto asked the obvious but uncomfortable question: why would any nation want to negotiate with the United States if we can't even honor the agreements we already signed? It's not just about economics, it's about reputation. Once you show the world that your word doesn't hold, every future negotiation gets harder, longer, and more costly. Credibility in trade isn't measured by how tough you sound at a rally. It's measured by whether your partners can trust you tomorrow. She also exposed the unrealistic spin behind the administration's defense. Negotiating one major trade deal took 2 years. 2 years at what she called breakneck speed. And yet now the claim is that nearly 50 countries can be dealt with almost simultaneously? That's not strategy, that's wishful thinking. And wishful thinking isn't a foundation for a stable global economy. Then she brings it closer to home, and this is where her frustration turns personal. In Nevada, in places like Las Vegas, the economy isn't built on exporting steel or cars. It's built on people. Tourists, conventions, travelers from every corner of the globe who pour billions into hotels, restaurants, casinos, and entertainment. Tourism isn't just a line on a balance sheet, it's jobs. It's bartenders, waitstaff, hotel cleaners, taxi drivers, and small business owners. And here's the ripple effect many people don't think about. When tariffs are slapped on foreign goods, it raises costs abroad. Families in Canada, Europe, or Asia suddenly have less money to spend. And one of the first things people cut back on when budgets tighten is travel. That means fewer international visitors, fewer dollars spent in Nevada, and fewer paychecks for American workers. Tariffs don't just hit imported products. They boomerang back and hit the service sector hard. So when Cortez Masto asked, "What do I tell my constituents? Do I just tell them their jobs don't count, that they're not part of the real economy you're talking about?" That was more than a rhetorical jab. It was a reminder that economic pain isn't abstract. It lands on people's lives. People who don't have the luxury of waiting out a trade war. And what did the ambassador offer in return? Not a plan, not even an acknowledgement that tourism is being hammered. Just vague reassurances, recycled talking points, and eventually a deflection that ended with Cortez Masto basically inviting him back to her office to start from scratch. That moment, when a senator has to tell a top trade official to go back and do his homework, says everything about how shallow this policy really is. The bigger lesson here is about the cost of slogans. Tariffs sound tough, they sound patriotic, but without precision and planning, they create chaos. They damage trust with allies, they distort markets, and they hit industries you'd never expect, like the billion-dollar tourism economy in Nevada and across the country. In other words, they can hurt the very people politicians claim to be fighting for. So we should be asking, is this really the price we're willing to pay? Should workers in tourism, hospitality, and service industries be collateral damage in a trade war waged without a clear endgame? Or is there a smarter way to defend American jobs, one that strengthens trust abroad instead of eroding it, and one that recognizes the full scope of America's economy, not just the parts that fit neatly into a campaign slogan? That's the bigger conversation we need to have, because tariffs aren't just numbers on a chart, they're choices that ripple into real lives. So now I'll turn it over to you. What do you think? Are blanket tariffs a necessary shock to the system, or are they a reckless gamble that puts industries like tourism in the crosshairs? Let me know in the comments, because this debate is far from over. And if you value these deeper breakdowns that go beyond the sound bites, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to understand the real human cost behind these policies.